Geoff Lewis here from Seriously Series, and welcome to another 4x4 top tip video. Here today we're going to take a bit of inspiration from one of our previous series that we've done on the channel, the Origin series. And today we're going to look at how particularly ropes, cables and all that have evolved over the years, and what you in particular could use if you get stuck out there on the open trail or on that next big adventure. So if you want to find out what's going on here and more, you know exactly what to do. Click on that subscribe button down below, click on that notification button too, but most importantly, stay tuned. This video here today might be a little bit controversial, and believe me, I'm not trying to rub anyone up the wrong way here today. I'm just presenting the facts. I'll leave the interpretation up to you. Now, the concept of pulling heavy items across the landscape isn't anything new. We ourselves, human beings or Homo sapiens, have been doing it for thousands of years, and we're still doing it today. Shock horror. So you would think over this millennia of evolution that we'd have things down to pat. Well, we kind of do, but now we've got a plethora of choices out there on the market. So I'm going to start off really where it all began. Now, we here at Seriously Series aren't about making carbon copies. Instead, we do things our own way, mixing a bit of traditional means with a little bit of the modern. And one of the things that I've shown in a previous video on how to use a capstan winch is this hemp rope. Now, hemp rope is fantastic. It is a really good product. It's light, like its more modern counterpart, plasma rope, Dyneema rope, whatever you want to call it. It's light, it has a really good binding quality, it has minimal stretch in it too, which is what you want if you're going to be using anything in a winching operation of some kind. But like anything, it does have its downfalls. It needs to be kept dry. It needs to be kept out of direct sunlight or UV, hence why we use a Hessian sack. But as I said, for a capstan winch, it has fantastic binding qualities. And using natural fibres for rope and cord is something that we ourselves, human beings, have done since the dawn of time. The Aborigines up in the Kimberley region here in Australia used the banyan tree. The Britons in the Isles of Britain used, I believe, willow bark, and they would soak this in a river and then they would slowly rip it apart bit by bit, weave it together, and that would form the rope, the cord and everything that they required to pull the large stone tablets across the landscape to make Stonehenge. So it really is a tried and tested means. Now, hemp rope was really the way to go up until probably the late 1960s, when it started getting replaced by its, I guess, descendant, the polyurethane or polymer ropes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, as I mentioned, the key thing with using anything in a winching operation is you don't want it to have a huge amount of stretch. That's why we don't use snap straps. Now, one of the other things, and as I said, this is a controversial video, is chain. Now, chain was something that was used pretty much everywhere. And when I started doing this quite a few moons ago, I didn't have a winch extension strap, so I actually used a drag chain. Now, drag chains are like petrol. People get very scared of them very quickly, and they need to be respected, and you need to know what you're doing. If you do have a chain of some description, it needs to have a tag on it, and it needs to have a in-date rating on it too. The other thing that you need to do is you need to inspect the chain. Now, chain actually wears out over time. Like rope, and like hemp rope, and even, as I keep mentioning, plasma rope, Dyneema rope, and even steel cable, over time, its tensile strength, or the overall strength of the bit of kit itself, deteriorates, and this is no different with chain. The other thing that you need to look for is inspect each and every link and make sure that there's no pitting. Pitting indicates that obviously corrosion is occurring deep within the link itself, and therefore ruining the overall integrity of the chain. The other thing that you need to look at is the actual link itself. Links will actually wear on the curved end of it, and they'll form, instead of a nice smooth curve, they'll form more of like an ellipsoid shape or slightly pointed. If that's the case, then you need to throw the chain away. Now, this chain here is very old. I actually don't know how old it is, and I don't use it for any winching applications. It's just something I use in the workshop to haul engines around and maybe tow a vehicle forward or back. They are a handy thing to have, but as I said, there are safer means that we can use nowadays, like winch extension straps and obviously other things too. But they are handy to have at least one in your convoy. They're fantastic for dragging obviously logs off the track, trees, whatever it might be. And look, if push comes to shove and you're stuck on the beach and your four-wheel drive's getting pushed further and further out into the ocean and you need a winch extension strap or something just to get you that little bit further, then a chain's probably going to save the day. As I said, you need to respect it. Make sure that you've got something over it that is incredibly heavy. I like to always carry a few Hessian sacks, and I can actually fill half of that up with sand and another one with sand too, tie it around the top and sit that over the chain itself. So it's got a good ballast there. So if it does snap, it's going to fall straight to the ground. Now, moving on and moving a little bit closer to the present day is steel cable. Now, steel cable is something that many of us have moved away from for a number of reasons, and good reasons for that too. It is incredibly heavy. This is 20 metres of steel cable here, and it probably weighs close to, I would say, about 10 to 15 kilos, depending on how many wheat bix you've had that morning. So it is a lot of weight to carry. It does also require a bit of preparation. You need to keep it oiled and run it through an oily rag every now and then, otherwise it's going to rust, which means you've got to unspool and spool your winch repeatedly, every probably 6 months, I would say, depending on what climate you're in. The other disadvantage with it is too, if it becomes frayed, it can turn your little mitts into something not too pleasant to look at. So one of the other things you should always have with you is a good pair of rigging gloves. Now, rigging gloves are quite unique because they're actually made out of leather, and leather allows the rope or whatever you're using to be able to slide through your hand. Using rubber gloves is a big no-no because rubber gloves are designed to actually grip. So always make sure that you get rigging gloves, leather gloves, and use them. The idea of the glove is, obviously, as you probably know, it's about minimising the wear and tear on your skin. You can replace a pair of gloves easily enough, but it takes a lot longer for your hands to heal. So that's one of the disadvantages, is obviously the steel cable fraying. And if that happens, then it needs to be cut off or it needs to be replaced. Now, there are some advantages with steel cable. It does last a very, very long time. Now, this is something that I'll talk about over here in a minute. So that's really, the essence of steel cable. It's fantastic, and you can do a lot with it, and as I've said, it lasts a long time. Now, here we've got some plasma rope. I'll just put it on top here. And I remember when this first came out, plasma rope, it must have been about over 20 years ago, and it was the best thing since sliced bread, and it really is fantastic. Like hemp rope, it floats on water. Like hemp rope, you can spline it, you can tie knots in it, you can do all kinds of things. But it is a lot more, I guess, durable in some sense. And this here can obviously hold 5 tonne, but it's very, very thick. And this can probably do about double or triple that. One of the things that you have to be careful with plasma rope is how it's actually stored and the conditions that it has to go up against when it's actually on your winch. Something that you need to obviously investigate, depending on which rope you're actually going to use and which manufacturer it comes from, is whether it actually has a UV rating or some kind of UV protectant. Particularly on the earlier variants, this is something that was actually lacking. And this meant that many people didn't realise that, in fact, after not a long period of time, probably 5 years or so, you would actually have to look at actually replacing the rope on your winch. Now, if you're doing that regularly, then that adds up. It's not cheap, this kit. And that's where, obviously, steel cable comes back into it. So anyway, just thought I'd give you a bit of a run through of what options are out there. And, this video isn't meant to sort of tell you what you need to do. It's just to provide you with some food for thought, you could say. So go out there, decide what works for you, do your own research, and look, at the end of the day, if it's going to get you out of trouble and it's going to do it safely for you because your health and well-being is the most important thing, then go ahead and do it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully it isn't too controversial for you. And if that is the case, then please click on that subscribe button down below. Please click on that notification button too. And if you are enjoying the content here at Seriously Series, then please do consider supporting Seriously Series on Patreon by clicking on the Patreon icon at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Anyway, I hope to see you in our next video. See you then.